In the cold stone halls of Aldrovia, one ring had passed from hand to hand for 300 years. Kings had worn it, queens had guarded it, and now, on a gray winter morning, an old king made a choice that would break one heart and lift another. He did not tell the palace. He did not tell his wife. He simply called for the young princess and closed the door behind her. What he placed in her palm that day would change the crown forever. Old King Alden of Aldrovia was not a man who acted without thought. For 60 years he had watched his kingdom through good harvests and hard winters, and in all that time he had learned one thing above all, that power without kindness is a cold and empty thing. Now his hands shook when he lifted his teacup, and the doctors spoke to him in careful, gentle voices. He knew, though no one said it aloud, that his days were growing short. In a locked drawer beside his bed sat a small velvet box. Inside it was the Everlight Ring, a band of old gold set with a single blue stone that seemed to hold a piece of the sky. It had belonged to his mother, and to her mother before that, passed down through the royal line for 300 years. Whoever wore it was seen as the true heart of the family, the one trusted to carry its honor forward. For years everyone in the palace had assumed the ring would go to Queen Mirella, his second wife. She was clever, elegant, and always present at his side during ceremonies. She wore fine jewels and spoke beautifully to visiting nobles. Many believed she had already earned the right to the Everlight, and she believed it too, though she never said so out loud. But King Alden had been watching someone else. Her name was Catherine, the wife of his son, Prince Edmund. She had married into the family years ago, a quiet woman with steady eyes and a warm, patient manner. She did not chase attention. She visited sick children in the city hospitals without cameras following her. She remembered the names of servants and asked about their families. When the king was tired, it was Catherine who sat with him and simply listened, asking nothing in return. The king had said nothing of his thoughts to anyone, but slowly, quietly, a decision had taken shape in his heart, one he knew would surprise the whole court and wound the queen who expected to be chosen. On a gray winter morning, he rang the small bell beside his bed and asked a servant to bring him one person, not the queen, not his advisors. "Bring me Catherine," he said softly, "and tell no one." The servant bowed and hurried away, unaware that he was setting in motion a secret that would soon shake the entire palace. Catherine came quickly, still unsure why the king had called for her alone. She found him sitting by the window, a blanket over his knees, the winter light pale on his face. He smiled when he saw her and gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit with me a while," he said. "There is something I must say, and I have waited too long to say it." She sat, folding her hands, sensing that this was no ordinary talk. The room was quiet. Somewhere far off in the palace, a clock ticked, and the low murmur of servants drifted through the halls. The king spoke slowly. He told her about the ring, its history, its meaning, the 300 years it had traveled through his family. He told her how it had always been given not to the most powerful person in the family, but to the one with the truest heart. Catherine listened, still not understanding why he was telling her all this. Then he reached into the drawer, took out the small velvet box, and opened it. The blue stone caught the pale light and glowed like a captured star. "This is yours now," he said simply. Catherine's breath caught. She shook her head at once. "Your Majesty, I cannot. This belongs to the Queen. Everyone knows it should go to Mirella. I am only—" "You are the one I trust," the king said, cutting her off gently. "I have watched you for years. I have seen who you are when no one is clapping. Kindness, Catherine, is the rarest crown of all, and you wear it without even knowing." Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to argue, but the old king's face was calm and certain, and she understood that his mind was fully made up. "There will be anger," he warned her quietly. "The queen will feel wounded. The court will whisper, but a king must choose with his heart, not with his fear. When I am gone, this ring will remind them all what truly matters." He pressed the box into her hands and closed her fingers around it. "Wear it not as a jewel," he said, but as a promise. Care for this family. Protect the small people who cannot protect themselves. That is all I ask." Catherine could not speak. She only nodded, holding the box against her chest as though it were something alive. The king leaned back, tired but at peace, as if a great weight had finally left his shoulders. Outside, snow began to fall softly against the glass. Neither of them noticed the shadow that paused just beyond the door, a figure who had come to check on the king, and who had heard every single word. Queen Mirella stood frozen in the corridor, her hand pressed to her mouth, her heart turning cold. Queen Mirella walked back to her chambers in a daze, the king's words echoing in her mind. "This is yours now." She had waited years for that ring. She had stood beside Alden at every ceremony, smiled at every guest, played the perfect queen. And now, in a single quiet moment, it had been given to Catherine, a woman who had married into the family and never once asked for glory. She sat before her mirror and stared at her own reflection. She was still beautiful, still elegant, still every inch a queen. But the Everlight Ring had passed her by, and everyone in the court would soon know it. The shame of it burned in her chest like fire. At first, anger took hold of her. She thought of going straight to the king, of demanding an explanation, of reminding him of all she had done. She thought of speaking against Catherine, of planting doubts, of turning the court whispers in her favor. For a long, dark hour, these bitter thoughts filled her mind. But Queen Mirella was not a foolish woman. As the fire in her cooled, a harder truth began to surface. She thought back over the years, and slowly, painfully, she began to see herself clearly. She remembered all the times she had smiled for the cameras but forgotten the servants' names. She remembered the sick children she had never visited, the tired king she had left alone while she attended grand parties. She had wanted the crown's rewards, but she had rarely done the crown's quiet, thankless work. And Catherine had, without ever being asked, without anyone watching. The thought was hard to swallow. Mirella pressed her hands to her face and sat in silence for a long time, the truth settling over her like the falling snow outside. She could fight this. She had the power, the influence, the words to cause trouble. She could make Catherine's life difficult and the palace tense. But what would it gain her? A ring given in bitterness meant nothing. The king had not chosen with cruelty. He had chosen with his heart, and deep down, Mirella knew his heart had chosen truly. That night she barely slept. She rose before dawn and walked the cold corridors alone, past the portraits of old kings and queens who had once worn the Everlight. Each face seemed to look down at her, asking the same silent question: what kind of queen will you choose to be? By the time the sun rose, something had shifted inside her. The jealousy was still there, small and aching, but beside it grew something new, a quiet resolve to become the woman she had always pretended to be. She turned and made her way toward Catherine's chambers, not to accuse, not to fight, but to say something she had never expected to say. Her heart pounded as she raised her hand to knock, unsure of how the younger woman would receive her. Catherine opened the door and froze when she saw the queen standing there in the early light. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Catherine's hand tightened around the door frame, certain that anger and accusation were about to fall upon her. But Mirella's face was not cruel. It was tired and softer than Catherine had ever seen it. "May I come in?" the queen asked quietly. Catherine stepped aside. Mirella entered and stood in the middle of the room, gathering her words. On the small table lay the velvet box, closed. Both women looked at it, and the silence stretched between them. "I heard," Mirella said at last. "Yesterday I was at the door. I heard everything the king said." Catherine's heart sank. "Your Majesty, I never wanted this. I told him it should be yours. I would give it back this moment if—" "No," Mirella raised a hand. "That is exactly why he chose you, because you would give it away without a second thought, and I—" her voice broke just slightly. "I would have fought the whole world to keep it." She walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered gardens. "I spent last night angry," she admitted. "Then I spent it ashamed. I have worn fine gowns and jewels for years, Catherine, but I forgot what the ring truly means. You did not. You lived it quietly while I was busy being seen. Catherine came closer, her eyes gentle. You are still the queen, she said softly. Nothing changes that, and I do not wish to take your place beside the king. Mirella turned to her, and for the first time there was no rivalry in her eyes. Perhaps that is the lesson, she said. The ring was never a prize to be won. It was a duty to be carried. The king saw that you already carry it, and I mean to learn from you, not envy you. Tears shone in both women's eyes. Slowly, Mirella reached out and took Catherine's hands in her own. Wear it well, she said, and let me help you carry the weight. This family will need us both. In the weeks that followed, King Alden grew weaker, but he did so with a peaceful heart. He watched the two women work side by side, Mirella lending her elegance and voice, Catherine lending her warmth and quiet strength. Together they visited the sick, comforted the poor, and steadied the court. The whispers that might have torn the palace apart faded into nothing. When the old king finally passed, he did so smiling, knowing the crown was safe in loving hands. And on Catherine's finger, the Everlight Ring glowed softly, its blue stone catching the light like a small piece of the sky, a reminder to all who saw it that the truest power in any kingdom is not gold or glory, but a kind and faithful heart. And in the halls of Aldrovia, people would say for years to come that the king's greatest decision was not a law or a battle one, but a single, quiet choice made behind a closed door.